A warm welcome to a new episode of Leaders Talk. My guest today is the complexity expert, Anne Caspari.
It seems we all know complexity. Our kids know complexity. We test how is mom today, or how is my partner today, and we don't plan it with an Excel sheet or marriages and stuff like that. But somehow this didn't enter our organizational development or design world. We still pretend our organizations are a predict and control world and resolve our human challenges with the same attitude or the same tools, and that doesn't work.
Leaders Talk, the interview podcast portraying leaders who are committed to better leadership, better organizations, and a better world. Hosted by Managing Partner of Leadership Choices and co-founder of the Cosmic Foundation, Karsten.
Anne is part of the core team of Leadership Choices, and she's an environmental planner by training. So she focuses on ecology and the complexity of ecologic system for all her lives. And over the years, she has translated that into dealing with humans and human systems, and to add the human factor into the complexity thinking. And she takes us on a tour how we can apply this to decode culture in social systems and how we can use this in organizational coaching. And with this, let's go right into the talk with Anne Caspari. A very warm welcome to Anne Caspari. Anne, welcome to Leaders Talk.
Thank you. Looking forward.
Anne, we are both German, but we decided to do this podcast in English simply for one reason, to reach more people, but also because you are an expert in something that somehow makes more sense in English.
Exactly, sensemaking.
Okay, so we talk about sense making, but before we do that, who are you and what do you do, Anne?
I'm a coach. I'm specialist for complexity in coaching, and I'm originally a landscape architect or environmental planner, and I got into coaching some 20 years ago. But we called it differently. We called it consciousness training, and that's what I'm still doing. So that whole arc.
We are also colleagues within Leadership Choices, and you are also part of the organizational coaching core team, which is kind of the core where we design our approach, organizational coaching. And you brought the idea of complexity theory to Leadership Choices. When you started to talk to Uwe and me about it, how puzzled did we look like?
You didn't look that puzzled. You looked interested. It's like, whoa, what could that be? So you looked you looked interested and always eager to learn new things.
So, and if we start, assuming somebody never ever heard of anything around complexity, there's a model called Cynefin. Maybe we start there. It's not a model, by the way, it's a framework. Language matters. So help us understand what it is and why it's a framework and not a model.
The Cynefin Framework is created by Dave Snowden. It's a close colleague and also mentor from us. He's very adamant that it's not called a model, because a model is basically a representation of reality. So you make a architectural model of a house that you want to build, for example. And a framework just helps organizing knowledge. That's more or less.
Okay. And let's apply this to the Cynefin framework. How does it work?
The Cynefin Framework helps organizing knowledge, or it's a real-time decision-making support tool, because it has a look at contexts, and it differentiates between ordered context, complex context, and chaotic context. So there are There are realms where it's more ordered in complicated or simple, where you have a cause and effect that can be measured or that can be predicted. And you have the more complex world or domains where this isn't the case, where you have so many variables that you can't really plan ahead. And then you have in chaos, it's more like you have a given infrastructure that has broken after catastrophe, like in the R Valley or after tsunami, for example, that you have temporarily a chaotic state. And it's important because it has different laws and different internal workings
Okay.
according to which domain you are in.
So you say it's a decision support tool. Assuming I'm a leader, how can I use it? I mean, what would be those laws in these different realms that you're talking about?
Well, you have a look as a leader, you have a look where either your projects or your team, depending what you look at, where you are and what is actually happening right now. So you have a look. If you're in the complicated domain, you have manuals, you know what to do. You have different heuristics how to go about things. For example, you analyze your problem situation, and then you probably know how to respond. Sometimes the answer isn't directly in your face, so you need maybe an expert to deal with this. But your car breaks down. You yourself, you can look at, I don't know, 5 different things or more that you know it could be broken in your car. For the rest, you need an expert, but it's not magic to the expert. They know where to look, what to do, basically, and that's the complicated domain. And that's
Complicated means given the expertise that I can
yeah,
procure outside or I have myself, and a good root cause analysis with
right.
cause and effect, and
Yep.
because a valve somewhere got clogged,
Yep.
something somewhere downstream is not working.
Yeah. And
Okay.
this is the domain of manuals, of knowledge, of systems thinking, of extrapolation, of scenario planning. So you can plan ahead knowing your variables. Yeah.
And now let's look at the complex route.
In the complex realm, there is still somehow cause and effect, but it's not. It's not either. It's not accessible or it's not known. It's the if in the complicated world, I'm talking about unknown knowns. Here, I talk about unknown unknowns. Yeah. So I just can't plan ahead by looking backwards. That means hindsight doesn't lead to foresight. So it's the realm of, yeah, human interactions, and so many variables that I don't know what will happen. So I talk about systems, and I need a completely different heuristic or way to go about, which is probe, sense, respond. I need to have a probe. I need to test basically the system I'm in. I need to know what dispositional state it has, how it will react, because uh, since I don't know cause and effect, we talk more about correlation. Yeah, I don't know what happens. It's like all the markets out there are so complex. We have hunches, we can predict some little things, but we don't know how the market will respond in a human system.
And I can imagine if somebody who is a decision maker hears this for the first time, it's very frustrating because as managers, we want to have a illusion of control, right? And complicated, I can somehow control. I need more experts. I need a better experts. I need a different approach. I need Six Sigma. But in the complex world, what do I do then as a leader?
Yeah, that's exactly it, Karsten. It seems we all know complexity. Our kids know complexity. In our families, we know. We test how is mom today, or how is my partner today. Before, and we don't plan. We don't plan it with an Excel sheet or marriages and stuff like that. But somehow this didn't enter our organizational development or design world. Yeah, so we still pretend our organizations are a predict and control world, and some parts of it are. It's like if we have a client through leadership choices, they're in the car manufacturing industry, and of course they have where they manufacture the cars and with robotic support. I can and I have to control things, and they're predictable, and everything an algorithm can help with. That is in the predictable world. But we try and resolve our human challenges with the same attitude or the same um, tools, and that doesn't work. Yeah.
And this is where the complexity thinking fits very well to this two loops model of this emergent loop, which is just another term. Emergent is just another term for complexity. It is something that I cannot predict from hindsight how foresight will look like.
Exactly. Yeah. So the term emergence is, of course, belongs to ecosystems. And if I have, you can imagine if I have a plan, which normally in systems thinking is the case, like I have like 3 different directions where I want to go, like scenarios. And the thinking is more, I have a look where I'm now, and then I want to close the gap to where I want to be. That's the 5-year plan. Where do you want to be in 5 years or something like that? I'm here now. This is my direction. The problem is I don't look anymore left and right to what is emerging. Yeah. And if you have a look, 5 years back at what type of challenges we were facing in the last 5 years, they were unheard of, unprecedented, even with Corona and other things. So yeah, and so you need to have a look first, not into the future, and then when I close the gap, you have a look at the present time. What is already here right now? What wants to emerge, and what is also holding it in place right now? How come how come the present is like it is today?
So that means I'm just recapping so that I make sure I understand. So the moment when people, more than, I don't know, 3 people come together, situations start to become a little bit unpredictable. And the more and more people I have, they have their needs, they have their wants, they have their state, they have their history, they have their behavior patterns, they interact. And because we cannot predict how they will interact, at the end of the day, decisions are made, paths of decisions are created, and a direction emerges eventually, right? And that direction we could not predict. If it was so easy, then I could predict today, or I can decide today that I'm market leader as a company, right?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, there are other players. Well, fortunately, there are other players in the market
Yeah.
who have maybe the same game or the same goal, and as a result, it is an emergent property. You would say it is a non-linear development. Nothing that I can easily say, do these 5 things, and you'll be market leader. Something like that.
Yeah, more or less. That fits it quite well.
Okay, good. Now, when you said what is present today, that also reminds me of weak signals.
Yeah.
So can you tell us about weak signals and what is their role?
So weak signal detection is one of the capacities that you actually could have as a coach or a leader, that you have a feel towards what else is possible here, or where are signals that say, pay attention. Because us humans work through anomalies. They pay attention only if there's something new. Yes, like a novelty reception mode or something like that. So weak signals could be, let's say, in a company where there are certain complaints that where people are either frustrated or running against a wall or saying, look, there's something that isn't working. Yeah. and it's either heard or not heard. It makes a huge difference. Yeah, if these concerns are could be micro concerns. It's like, look, I don't feel well in the presence of a certain person. Yeah, and if that's female or not doesn't really matter. Or hey, there are concerns about the market. Yeah. And leadership is either brushing it off or not listening, or says, this is the fifth time this is coming up into our attention field. Let's have a look. And that is a weak signal detection.
Okay. And what I observe, I think, or what we both observe, is that self-reflection is less and less a quality of leaders, right? Because everybody's so driven and so much driven by their agenda rather than driving their agenda. And even if they are driving their agenda, they're busy doing that. Now, how many leaders have you met that are able to sit and pause and discuss something unimportant in commas as weak signals?
Depends. I don't think it's so rare. Um, but then you would talk about a leader with the right nose, as we say in German. I'm not sure if it's an English expression. It's like some leaders, they have it in their blood, they have it in their DNA to just have a look what's going on at the market, having a look what's going on, have a good feel for what's going on in their own organization. Yeah. And then you run in open doors with something like the Cynefin Framework or weak signal detection. And some other people can actually learn it to pay attention. And there are tools that help with weak signal detection in a company.
So, in other terms, another term for weak signal detection when you have a leader with the right nose could be intuition.
Could be intuition,
That
exactly.
he or she, after talking to people, walking the aisles, looking into faces of people,
Yeah.
he or she gets the feeling something doesn't sit quite right. Something is changing. And I can't really, put a handle on it, but it's something that is different.
Mhm.
And then I think here is where SenseMaker comes in. That's a tool that also Snowden has developed or inspired. I'm not quite sure. How does that? What does it do, and how does it work?
Okay. Can I just tell one story before I go there?
Of course.
It's working with a Swiss client and in the leadership team. Um, there was a leadership program, and one of the people in the leadership team says, "Well, the boss, he's a bad leader," he says. And I said, uh, "Wow, that's quite a verdict because I have been working with him, and he actually, that leader he was referring to, is actually somebody who understands complexity." Yeah, without any of the theory behind it, but I know he understands it. He has that kind of nose that we're talking about. Yeah? But that person he needed for his own team, he needed like planning, predict and control planning. So that I don't know what my to do with with my team of 20 people. He doesn't give me the direction. I need I need that 2-year plan. So therefore, this other guy is a bad leader. And so we discussed it together, and it turned out that that the boss, he was a natural at complexity, leading in complexity, let's say, and he could wait, for example, till something broke in the system, and then say, "Okay, now we can move." Yeah, he could direct the emergence and say, "No, we can't tell it yet." He was good with holding uncertainty. Yeah, he didn't need to fill in the gap with planning. What he wasn't good at was communicating at the edge to this other guy who needed the plan. Yeah, he could have said something like, and then we established that he could have said something like, "Look, I can't give you the 2-year plan. I can't even give you the 6 months plan. But for the next 3 months, you can go in this direction, and then we look again."
Yeah.
So we established that as a little protocol, let's say, at that edge to, from complexity, and being, having a look, going the next step, then having a look again, and let the adaptive pressures work, and then look again to what the other guy needed in terms of planning. That was quite a good example.
Okay. And what I in the beginning, when you talked about complexity and we read about it and we had a workshop with Dave Snowden, which was mind bending, I always thought of it as a cognitive process.
Mm.
But I mean, that's only part of the truth, right? Because there's also this felt sense, that gut feel, that element of I'm uneasy with something without being able to
Exactly.
say it, right?
Yeah. When you feel something's off, or something isn't being heard. And that's the other thing where then the SenseMaker can come in. If you have an organization with many different layers of management in between, and it's hard to hear or listen to the workforce, because it gets sifted out, it gets not talked about, or that your coworkers, they run into same kind of difficulties, and that information isn't transported to the decision makers. Yeah. Because the organization is either too big or has too many levels, or they don't have a habit of listening anymore to these signals. And this is something where the SenseMaker can come in.
Now, before we discuss the SenseMaker in more depth, why don't I use one of the many surveys that I have in my company? I don't know, best place to work, or employee satisfaction survey, or quality survey. What's the problem with these surveys?
Servers have an inherently different logic. They have a linear logic. They have a different design, and I think with a lot of surveys, there is an inherent design flaw, which is basically to have complex challenges or something that happens, to break it down into a linear scale, which is the Likert scales from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. And these tend to average a felt sense that shouldn't be averaged in a way. It's like it always depends on the context, whether you need something or not. And you can't really say it, this is 5 over the arc of 6 months or a year. It doesn't mean anything. So you don't have context, and you have it flattened. Yeah. And so we worked years ago. We were approached by IKEA. We can say the name because we're allowed to say it out loud. And they said that their free comment section exploded in their surveys because the people weren't anymore okay with filling out the pre-formatted survey. They wanted a different voice to be heard. And then they approached us about the SenseMaker.
Okay, so what I hear from you is, first of all, it is if you want to capture complexity, a classical survey with Likert scales is actually a complicated tool
Yeah.
for the complicated world.
Yeah.
And that's number one. Number two is there's values but no context. So to interpret the data is kind of, hard to meaningless because it's all averaged out. And I think there's a third dimension which you inherently said this is, first of all, you have to assume that you're asking the right questions, but how do you know that you're asking the right questions, right? You could be
Correct.
10% towards the left of the real problem, and then you're measuring something that is only half of the truth or something.
Correct.
Okay, good. So we understand now why classical linear surveys have a design flaw. Now, how does the SenseMaker work?
The SenseMaker works. It's a software-supported tool. The SenseMaker works first with as we call it, a non-hypothesis question. So as you just said, I don't ask you, do you like working with us? Which is the leading question. But I say, imagine your best friend comes to you and wants to work at your company. What would you tell them? What story out of your everyday work life would you tell them that exemplifies how it is working here? It can be positive, negative, and then you tell, the so-called water cooler stories or coffee machine stories. Something that you would tell a friend or your partner about when you come home. Yeah, it's each of these stories, and we are storytelling animals. Yeah, each of these stories carries um, a piece of the culture or a piece of the structure or the system. Says, oh wow, is this the second time or the 10th time I'm asked to fill in the gap for this? Because the system isn't taking care, I have to take care personally. Or I was on holiday, I came back, and my colleagues took care of everything. How cool is that? That piece carries an information. Yeah, and imagine then you can scale it with a SenseMaker because volume is not a problem of stories. We call them micro stories or micro narratives. It has not so much into storytelling, but into snippets of everyday lived experience. Yeah. And then we have this working assumption, let's say, that the sum total of all these encounters in a workday, they make up the culture. It's how we deal with each other on a daily basis. Yeah, not the culture program and nothing that is written on a website. Yeah, but how we really deal with each other. And these snippets, they portray this. And imagine you have like 50, 100, 500 of them. You can see in the back end it collects patterns. The second instance about the SenseMaker is that then people are asked to evaluate their own stories to put them in context. And we work with so-called triads or dyads, where in a triad there are three different aspects, for example, of decision making or a culture or leadership, depending what you're after, what you want to know. We would design it in a way that there's a tension field that equally important three things, that then they have to allocate their story in that tension field. So it's not a flat linear Likert scale, but there's a trade-off between these signifiers, as we call them. And that gives us really cool data about the context of that story, because most of our task in our working life is actually complex or with trade-off or some dilemmas or some polarities that people have to navigate the whole day, sometimes without even thinking. Yeah. And that's also really cool about the SenseMaker. It surfaces unarticulated needs. So you as a respondent, you don't have to have reflected on what's going on in your company. Yeah, so most people, if they're asked by normal surveys, they go like, I don't know, but I can tell what happened to me last week.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let's do an example. So one question or one item is, what is a story you would tell a friend of you describing the nature of your work, something like that, or the nature of this place or something.
Yeah.
And then you write your comments, I don't know, people are helpful or people do their own thing. People leave at 5, people leave at 8, whatever. So things that are meaningful to me in this moment without, and I can write 10 stories, 20 stories of that, whatever comes to mind. What would be a tripartite, or how do you call this? It's a triangle or triad of self-signification or meanings that I can give that. What would be an example in that particular question?
Oh, I could say always in relationship to my story, in regard to my story, in my story, the focus was on processes, on culture, or on people. I could then put the cursor there where it fits. Yeah, decision making in my story was analytic. It was empathic or something else. That would fit that tension. These are designed with the client together, because we are after these turning points, or what is actually the tension fields that people need to navigate. And then the nice thing is we don't ask the respondents what we need to know or want to know, we ask the data what we want to know. So the data will surface this up. So that's really a cool thing.
Okay. So in other terms, none of the three angles of the triangle are good or bad.
No. Yeah.
They are, none of them is desired outcome. They are all describing, you say, a tension field, and a tension field, maybe to visualize, is a big triangle. And in this big triangle, there's all the micro narratives regarding this question. But since they are all placing themselves in this triangle, I see like a heat map where it looks like a topographic map, I would say, right? Where you can see, there's a cluster here, there's a cluster there. And then you can mouse over each point, and each point will give you the narrative that is behind it.
Yeah. You can mouse over that or actually combine it with give me all the negative to very negative stories that are about decision making or leadership that happen all the time. That's, of course, something I would be very, talking about weak signal detection, that's a strong signal, not a weak signal. Yeah. Or I can also say, and for that matter, we're after how is the system today in present time, how is it already resilient or not resilient, how is it behaving, how is the attitude towards change or sustainability or whatever is the client wants to know from their own workforce. We have a look at these patterns and how they what they say. So I can say, give me all the positive stories that happen all the time, or can we, what is this outlier cluster here that seems to have a solution, that we haven't even thought about.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you mentioned positive and negative. So each answer has the information positive, negative, or very negative, very positive, plus those three angles. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, you can put in some demographics if you like. It's all anonymous, so we need to be careful not to, be able to pinpoint people through the demographics. But sometimes we put in, how often this is happening, positive, negative scale. Sometimes also what kind of, country you work in, if this is a multinational, or what department you work in. How long are you in the company, that whatever would be cool to know for reading out the data in the back end.
Okay. And then you have several tension fields, because each question can have several tension fields. And afterwards, and that's the other thing compared to a survey. In a survey, you can read the results and they get accumulated and they get averaged, and you get a trust score of 2.8. And others have 3.1, right?
Yeah.
And you think everything is comparable, which is part of the complicated world. But here, how does sense making really work? Because you're not able to print it or something, right? It's all dynamic.
Yeah, well, you said it right. It's sense making as a verb, right? It's here you don't get a ready-made report that says your company is like that and you need to work on this. So we as consultants actually hold up a mirror and walk the client through their own data, and we help them make sense of their own data. And that is incredibly powerful. So it's not us as consultants who in this case, who deliver an answer and a verdict, but we say, okay, these are your data. What does it mean to you that there are so many stories in this angle where you say, like, pressure came from management, came from myself, came from the outside world as the market, and there's so many stories in the pressure came from myself. Yeah. So, and then we have a look, is that, for the client, we kind of like are the mouse of the client. Where would you be interested in looking more? Okay, so give us all the very negative stories about pressure comes from myself. Oh my God, we have a lot of, where people work nights and weekends and stuff like that. So that would be, and then only then, after we made sense on this collective level about what could that mean, that there are no stories where you maybe expected some, or what does this outlier here say? Yeah, so that's the sense making on this collective story level, on the cultural level, basically. And then you can every now and then dive into the actual story, because every story gives you context. So you say, okay, I'm interested in this cluster here with the pressure from myself. So 30 stories, 300 stories say similar things. Is this really the case? And then you read through the actual stories to say, oh my God, we didn't know that about, that people are paying with their own health for a systemic flaw, let's say. And then the question is directly, what can we already do tomorrow to heal this? To have less stories like these and more like those positive ones over there who seem to be doing pretty well. And the context tells us what exactly it is at a very, very practical level.
So sense making is a process. Sense making is happening in the eyes or through the eyes of the beholder. So the person watching, observing the data, forms patterns in his or her mind to kind of make sense of it and maybe come up with small steps, small experiments to see, can I shift the situation? But there's also a collective sense-making process, right?
Yeah.
Because if 10 people read the data, they could have 10 totally different conclusions from it.
Exactly. That's also that the story giver can evaluate their own story. It's not their leader, their boss, or us as consultants who say, well, your story, we put it into lack of resources or lack of leadership or lack of something else. Because it's a felt sense that's important. They can evaluate that themselves. That's called epistemic justice. Nice word in English. Yeah. But then you have to have a look what then the context is providing.
And that's a lengthy process, right? I mean, that is, or it can be a lengthy process. We tried it out for ourselves. Obviously, we work with this. And the first time I saw it, and I was expecting a report, right? It was like, when you're as impatient as I am, on a bad day, obviously on a good day, I'm super, super patient, but then you can have the urge to say, so tell us. I mean, you're the experts, tell us, right? And I can still remember how I tried to challenge you to tell us what we were supposed to see.
Yes, that's it's you say lengthy, I say thorough, maybe, or deep. I don't think it needs to be lengthy. In some of these instances, we talked about the intuition of a leader and the nose. You read one story, you know exactly what the story is all about, and it's a confirmation maybe of something that has been around in an organization, and you as a leader, you know exactly what to do next. Yeah. And that doesn't need to be a small shift or a micro shift. It could be, whoa, we're changing the revenue model, or we're changing the whatever reward models completely from tomorrow on, because there's something unfair in the system we didn't quite know. Yeah. Or we're changing the lighting on the parking lots. I mean, it can be, depending on which level of granularity you get the stories back, it can be at every level of hierarchy or every level of decision making. You have qualitative and quantitative data and the context to back you up to be able to decide how to move the whole system towards something more generative.
Okay. Okay. So we have micro narratives, we have self signification, we have additional data that would tell us very good, very bad. We have some demographic information. And with this, I can slice and cut the data in all different directions. Then there's the process of the sense making, which is a collective process. And it requires some training on the side of the leader. I would say that's fair. Once you do the first time, to really get into it and to see how that works. And then it can become a habit. Then it's something that next time you do it, it's way quicker. You understand how it works. You can make conclusions faster. And then you go into the little experiments and see, does it move the needle?
Yep.
Right. Now, how do you get people to fill in all these stories? Because that's something that they have to do on top of everything else.
Yeah, that's a good question. Before we go there,
Yes.
there's one more thing. The process of sense making actually starts with the design for, let's say, a leader or a manager or a team for that matter, because the question is, what do we want to know from our own people or our stakeholders? There's also the community projects, for example, more stakeholders. What do we want to know from them that we don't get through a normal survey? What are they not telling us because either there's no trust in the system, or we haven't asked in the right way, or we haven't listened. So that's all already, and taking a client through the co-design process is already, you've done it yourself. That's already where sense making starts, because you kind of like think, yeah, what is it that we really want to know? Where we ask the data what we want to know. Yeah. So
So that will be the known unknowns. But what about the unknown unknowns? Because
no,
there's the option that I don't even have the idea that I'm missing out on something.
well, then you can. It's all the question of how to ask something.
So the more open, the more generic,
Mm,
the better the likelihood to catch something.
mm, correct. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay. And I had asked you a question before, and that was, how can we make sure that people take the time to collect these micro narratives? Because it's not one and then you're done. The idea is to do it maybe daily or whenever something happens, right? So how do you motivate people to do that?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's really the idea, Karsten. That's right, to have an arc of time, because it's not just one momentum in time, like with a yearly survey, but we want to know, yeah, on a daily, weekly basis, how are you doing? And it's, you wait for the bus, you put in a story, or on the coffee. But it's doesn't take at the end of the day much more time away than you're putting in a WhatsApp message to somebody. It also works through an app where you can also, do audio recording on it or load up a picture. But yes, you're right. The motivation is crucial. So you need to have a system where people trust the system just enough to put in stories, even if we say it's all anonymous. They still need to do the work. So they need to be trusted that they're being heard, that the stories are being read, that because people do put some effort in to create these stories. Um, then maybe people need to know what happens to the stories. Do we get feedback from this? It works, of course, especially well if they see already changes in the system, and then you can, let's say you run the SenseMaker over 6 months or a year or even 2 years. You can actually, by timestamp, see if the culture, like the sum total of all micro shifts, has changed over time, or after an event, or after, I don't know, a new leader is there, or or something is changed in the setup or the DNA of the company or team.
So you can, what I'm learning from you is we can think in like a big survey, like 10 or 20 question thing, but we can also think in a one question micro, I don't know what it is, micro sense maker, that you would directly see this is what it was before, and this is what it looked like after. I can see how the pattern
Yeah.
changes.
You can actually put that graphically to see how the whole systems changes towards maybe more positive stories, or less pressure, or depending on what your inquiry is. Yes, that's possible. And still, the motivation needs to be there. It's you need to have a look a little bit. Ideally, if people, you do a trade-off. If people put in stories, they don't need to do other kind of reporting, for example, you know, or there's some kind of visibility around, or it's gamified. You can see the results immediately or something. So there needs to be a connection. Yeah.
So
Just
this needs to be engineered. So
yeah.
mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, but there are ways how to make this work.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So and this is when we look at our phase model, our organizational coaching phase model, there is the first part after the organizational coaching process starts, which is to position where are we? Where are we? right? To measure, to sense,
Yeah.
to feel what's going on right now. And SenseMaker is one way of giving a good answer, a complexity sensitive answer to the question, where are we right now as a system? Where do we stand?
Exactly. Where are we? What is actually happening right now? How do we get to be where we are? What's the culture right now? And we all know these, bon mots about the culture, eating strategy for breakfast. The SenseMaker is actually has a good answer to that because it's on a much lower granularity. It's much finer that you have a look at culture, because culture, if you think about it, it's a construct how we talk about culture. Culture is not a thing. Philosophers would call it a misplaced concreteness. Yeah. It's like climate change. We don't see it, and then sometimes, you know it yourself, us as coaches or consultants get an assignment. Could you please change our culture? Yeah. And it doesn't work that way. But if you have this, it can be portrayed through all of these micro narratives, through all of these lived experiences and felt senses that the whole workforce is having every day. We had, for example, one example where people, it was so important to them that it came up in the stories. They say, we don't greet each other in the morning. Yeah, we are so in our bubble, self-absorbed, we don't greet each other, and how easy is that, just to, to put attention there and say, well, and the whole culture shifted just because of this one little turning point. It's just, yeah.
And what I find interesting about it, it is based on behavior. So there's no hypotheses on values or,
All right.
norms or code of ethics or whatever. It is simply behaviors that everybody is observing and puts a meaning to afterwards in their own way. And that helps to understand the heat map of where the company is right now in that particular moment.
No, Karsten, you're making up a new file open with values, right?
Yeah.
So what I like about this, actually, and this is how I came about SenseMaker and Dave Snowden's work in the first place, is this whole value discussion, because um, we sometimes fall into this trap of thinking, oh, people have the wrong values. But value is one of these other emergent property of, of something. And we have this coaching approach also in leadership choices, that we say, no, people are not wrong. Yeah. And we don't tell them that they're wrong and they need to have different values. And this is actually quite congruent with the SenseMaker approach, because we can leave people with their values and don't tell them you have to have a different value. Value is also far too coarse a construct. Yeah. It's like, what is not greeting in the morning? It's not the wrong value. It's just maybe a non-attention to something. Yeah. And this is the SenseMaker portrays this, because in the stories of everyday interaction, values are baked in. Yeah. And behavior is baked in. But I don't go and say, you have the wrong values, we need to change your culture. But I can say, look, what can I change in the interaction design? Yeah, so that people greet each other again, or people see each other differently. Yeah, or people have this other behavior without making them somehow wrong, or they need to develop into different value.
And that reminds me of one of our programs that we're doing in a leading business school. And their part of the vision and mission statement is to be change maker. And so the question was, does everybody have to be change maker? And what is change maker? And to which degree am I a change maker? And what if I don't want to be a change maker for myself, but I like to be part of a school that is a change maker? So you have all these funny discussions where at the end, if you break it down to observable behavior, the interpretation room is a totally different one. Here is a remark in our own regards. if you are interested in learning more about complexity, about organizational coaching, you might want to check out our website, www.leadership-choices.com. We have the LC Coaching Academy, and in there's the organizational coaching module. And if this is what fascinates you, you will learn a heck of mind-bending stuff around systems and how to work with systems in the context of organizational coaching. So check it out. And if you have a question, there's a contact form where you can reach out and we'll get in touch with you and talk you through and explain or answer all your questions. And now back to the talk with Anne.
I'll make you another stupid example, if I may.
Sure.
Both of us are old enough to remember in the trolleys gone loose in the supermarkets some 30 years ago. It's like in my hometown, there are students from the school to put them together in these change of trolleys at the end of the day because people left them all over the parking lot. And then the engineer, it's like how much you could say now, I know it's a bit of a stupid example, but how much would the supermarket have talked about values? Please, dear customers, have it the right value to bring these trolleys back to where they belong. They could have done all 10 minutes, over the loudspeaker, some please, dear customers, think about the trolleys, give them back, or we give you brownie points or something like that. It wouldn't have happened. Maybe 10% of people would have changed behavior. So then the engineers got together and said, okay, how can we not change our customers' values or appeal to their moral instincts or make them better customers, But they invented the fund system. How do you say the
Refund.
yeah, the refund system where you put just enough money in and they probed it. What is the right amount of money? Because for 5 marks back then or 5 euros now is outrageous. For 10 pence, it would be maybe not enough. So, but for the 50 pence or for the euro you put in, you bring you behave and bring that trolley back to where it belongs. So you get your money back, you don't need to pay. So, they figured out we all are behaving really well. Now, even if that system shouldn't work, you still bring the trolley.
I was going to say, I think that's a great example
Yeah.
because I went shopping last week
Yeah.
and there were like 10 trolleys there that were not connected by this wire because somehow it didn't work. But people would bring it back nonetheless because
Yeah.
they now had learned collectively that this is what you do, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And we do, that didn't run as value trainings or developmental trainings or moral trainings. It just, made us do behavioral change through working with what is and working on constraints on different conditions, and that's actually quite elegant.
Okay. So that means even though the language and the approach seems to be complex, the outcome can be very tangible, can be very easy, right? And can be observable and can be surprisingly efficient.
Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, good. So we have that now. Now we have another tough nut to crack. Okay, so there's in our model, we have the first step is where are we? Okay. Then the next step is what's the direction of travel? Where do we want to go? And for this, we use the metaphor, the North Star, right? Which is in the Northern Hemisphere, a star that is, has always the same position in the sky and hence since, many, many hundreds, if not 1,000 years, helps sailors to navigate and to know where they are going. And this is for us in organizational coaching, this is a quality, a behavior quality that is needed in the organization or that people believe it is needed in order to achieve something. So in this school that I talked about, the name of the North Star was leading together, meaning there's less hierarchy, there's more togetherness, there's more Augenhöhe. We use this German word Augenhöhe, even if it was an international school, simply to mean this, the distance between boss and employees is shrinking. They are still the boss, and they're still employees, but the idea is that there's more empowerment, all of that. So it's a term that is loaded with some meaning. But then there's also, what do we need to unlearn? What are behaviors that have become a pattern, have become a ritual, have become an artifact in this place that are in the way of us achieving leading together, right? So, for example, some job families would say "du" to each other, so they are on a first name basis, and for others it would be "Sie" and Herr Professor or Frau Professor. So there would be a clear difference between this is how close we are with each other, and this is how close we are with you guys, namely not so close, because you're really from a different world, right? And that's a tiny little thing. And here we are using a tool that is even hard to pronounce S-train mapping. And we need to explain this a little bit, dear Anne. So maybe let's start with the term itself. What is an S-train?
The nursery goes straight into my first degree, which is more ecology and landscape planning. And an estuary is a river mouth that has a tide coming out, tide coming in. Yeah, it's not a delta, but water flows in both directions, and there's a lot of movement. It's very fluctuant is the word. So there's a lot of displacement of sand. There's sandbanks that they're not there anymore the next day. So it's a complex. Yeah, so it's always changing. And there are things possible at high tide, they're not possible at normal water, and the other way around. Also at low tide, you can maybe walk through it, and so you always have to have a look what is. That's the metaphor, and the interesting thing is really that water goes in both directions.
Okay, so we
We
have
don't have so many estuaries in Germany, but
we have the Rhine, I guess, right, in Rotterdam. Maybe that's a delta, I'm not quite sure, but it's or the Thames in England, right? So where you have a tidal wave when the tide is coming, and other than that, the water flows
yeah.
downhill as it would
And
usually.
navigation is tricky because you always have to have a look what has changed since last night, and yeah, which is a juxtaposition to what you're calling the North Star, which is rather fixed. Yeah, and that in the old days and even today, people used to navigate to not only to north, but they use it to navigate in all directions. Something that's fixed. Yeah.
Okay, so and how do you? Then there is hexes. So hexes, I've learned, is a Greek term, and it stays for something. It's not only a shape; it's that Greek term, and it actually says, if I'm not mistaken, it says something like value or a quality or something. No? So what is it?
Hexi is just the six shape with six. What do you say in English? Yeah, it's just that you put in the estuarine mapping. It's a method to plot projects, and you sort actors and anything that has agency in, let's say, a project over the next period of time. Could be 12 months or 3 years, doesn't really matter. So you have a horizon, and then you have a look, what are the actors, what else has influence on the system, what are roles for the projects, and let's say you want to make a system more resilient or more sustainable, or want to change. So you put your hexes that are just six shape, not
Hexagons.
yeah, hexagons. Yes, you put them according to time and energy efficiency or gradients. So one axis is time in order to change, and the other one is effort in order to change or to be more resilient. And then have a look, where are they allocating right now, and what time gradient or energy gradient, and the two of them do you need in order to maybe lower this effort to change. And that's a really, really cool method. and it's flexible and adaptive because of the metaphor of the estuary. And before you know it, you have plotted out something that is a strategy plan for the next 18 months. And it's especially for people who are think they not good at strategy. Because also with strategy is that word, oh, we need to do strategy. And for most people, that means planning. And before they know it, they're in the complicated domain. And they try to plan ahead and they don't see about these, constraints that they can actually work with in order to change behavior or to lower the energy gradient or the time gradient of something.
Okay, so let's do this slowly again. So we have a hexagon. A hexagon is a little, could be a paper card, like a hexagon, could be, and it represents an initiative, a project, an action. It is the smallest chunk of change that everybody can agree on. Is that fair to say?
Not necessarily change. It's an item you have to deal with. It can be an actor. It can be a model. It can be a process that you're dealing with. You're kind of like brainstorming all kinds of stuff, constraints, actors, project parts, things you need to deal with your group, and then you put these on these hexes. And then you sort them according to how much time and effort it is to change them.
Okay, so a hexagon would be the smallest chunk of people or things we need to deal with.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So we have that, which is quite a lot, I suppose, because typically you have a lot of things that people to deal with, but you focus on those that are key, I guess, for making a change or making an improvement towards a North Star. And then you have the factors time, and you have the factors invested energy, and then what?
The effect is that people say, for example, in the upper right corner where you had high energy, high time to change anything. Yeah, that in the equivalent, that would be the rocks in the estuary that, that people see, wow, there is too much energy effort or effort to change this. So we leave this in this time frame. We don't change anything. Yeah. For example, for most people, a relief. It's like, okay, we've been trying to push against this, and this is a wasted effort. So we leave that for time alone. Yeah, we just did that 10 days ago with a client, and we had two teams doing two estuary maps in parallel, and then comparing what's different, what's same, what's surprising. And the effect on the team was, before, they were always complaining about constraints that the bosses didn't have any say about. They were constraints from the law, constraints from the concern itself, from the company. And it was a requirement by law that they did it like this. Yeah. Whereas the workforce projected this on the leaders. And now they worked it out themselves, like, oh, okay, we can't push against this. This is a given, so let's not push and let's also not complain. What are we able to do something like this? That's the stuff that is lower in the energy gradients. And so they concentrate on this and then have a look. So how can we, like in the trolley example, how can we reframe some of the conditions, yeah, or the way to deal with, or some of the processes that we have, so the energy gradient is lower. And they found a lot of examples how they did. So it was a double thing,
Is it There's a similarity to circles of control, right? I mean, here in the circle of control, you have what
Hmm.
can I actually control, means I can make a decision, I can do it myself. Then I have what can I influence? That's, I need alliances. Some are more harder to influence. And then there's the stuff that I cannot change. These are the rocks, which is concern, which is society level, which is climate with it. So it's a little bit like that, right?
Yeah, on a lower granularity. Yeah, on a project level, it's like stuff like climate change wouldn't actually appear on the map. Yeah. Sometimes you have it that, you have a leader in the room and they say, oh, I can change this. Nobody else thought they can change it. I can change this, and it was changed the day after. And everybody says, whoa, we didn't know that you have the powers to change it. Yeah, that's a little bit circle of control. But what I find really good to work with in practice is that split between energy and time effort. Yeah.
Mm.
And then to overlap the two.
Okay.
Because sometimes some things, they just need time and little effort, and they fall off the map. And other things, they need no time but some effort. But once they're done, it's done. So you can actually play with this, and you have much more access to what can be moved.
I'm just thinking of the example of the hydrogen industry, right? So it's part of the energy change of our country, and there's a lot of stuff that is not developed, like networks and demand and all of that. And if you are a player in this field, there's so much uncertainty because of that. But if certain constraints are given, like a law that regulates how much you get paid for it, and you have infrastructure to transport the hydrogen, then all of a sudden everything else more or less falls in place because it's a maturing market,
Mhm.
it's a maturing industry.
So, yeah. One of the mistakes that people normally do, and we let them do the mistakes at front, so they've gone through this valley, is that the stuff they put on the hexes is far too broad, far too coarse. Yeah. It's like we need to develop marketing strategy, let's say. Marketing strategy is, yeah, but so you need to take this apart. And one of the heuristics is also, if people are have different perspectives on it, or they fight about it, let's say it this way, they need to break it down until they agree. So they need to take it into, make more hexes out of that big one, and say, okay, what kind of marketing strategy, when, what can we do? What do we already have? Do we have a website? Do we have this? Do we have that? Until they agree, this is what we can do. So it's kind of like they notice that. No, and that's also a mirror of how people normally are in a team. They're talking about stuff in terms that are far too broad and far too coarse. So everybody understands a different thing, and then they wonder why. We've talked about it. Why do we feel we haven't communicated what we really think, or how we really can actually change this? So that's quite cool in the process.
Okay. And if you apply this to the idea of organizational coaching, then the idea is that this can be helpful to understand what are things that this organization needs to unlearn,
Hmm.
like maybe to trust one another, or to, have, I don't know, different ways to relate to each other. Um, what is it that, or to be all excited if, a boss reaches in from another department, and then all of a sudden you need to drop everything and do that instantaneously and get all, shaken up and
Hmm.
lose your course, right? And what is it that you need to learn going forward collectively? Again, we are talking about behavior patterns, so that the organization can move more towards
Hmm.
what is the
It,
aspired behavior.
yeah. I'd like to think you can run it with whole organizations, of course, or teams and organizations. We really love this as a team effort, because the team is elaborating their own strategy. And at the end of that half day, they are aligned on steps. They know what constraints not to fight against. They know what constraints they can actually, in their own team, on their own level, what they can shift so that other things can happen, like in the trolley example. And they own it at the end of the day. It's not that a leader comes and says, look, that's our strategy for the next 18 months. Yeah. Because they see themselves what's possible, what not, what can we shift. They learn to think in energy gradients, yeah, in time and effort. They learn to argue until they agree, rather than discussions. Discussions are useless in this. It's like, no, 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 hang on. What is going on there?
Mm.
Yeah, it's not about, I think like that about a project and youth, and we don't agree and we leave it at that. No, we are really fighting it out until, oh yeah, there's a way to deal with this, and let's do it this way. Yeah.
So we agree that this part is a good thing, and this part we're not agreeing on. Okay, so let's break this down further until we come to something where you say,
Yeah.
yes, we can agree to that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. So that's something that can be done very well in a leadership team, for example, on a macro level, but it can also be done on a first line team that is dealing with clients, that is dealing with customers. So it can be done on many different levels, and it sounds intellectual, but it is intellectual from the facilitation standpoint, I guess. But since you break it down on behaviors or concrete stuff, right?
Yeah.
How
It doesn't need to be intellectual at all. I mean, I've done many workshops together also with my partner. We didn't mention any of these words. We didn't mention complexity. We didn't mention S-train mapping. We didn't mention constraint mapping, and we just let them do it. And then after a while, you can sort of introduce that afterwards or not. Yeah. So it's very practical. And the next step is even more practical, because then around these clusters that then come out at the S-train mapping, you then form safe to fail experiments to test them out in action portfolios. So really concrete little actions that tell you, is this working or not in a complex system?
And there we go back to the Cynefin framework
Yeah.
to say, yeah, how can we experiment around that? Okay, cool. I think we got that covered, Anne. And how did you actually got to know Dave Snowden? How did that come about?
Yeah, how did that come about? That was funny. I have a history of dealing with developmental models and frameworks for quite some time, since 2005. And towards, I don't know, 10 years later, 2012, 13, we grew more and more. There was an unease with this developmental logic that was actually meant to widen out, something that we called reductionism, that everything was just reduced to systems, but not interiority. And but then it seemed to be reductive itself. And there was this developmental bias everywhere, that says, higher, yeah, we know that higher is not better, but actually it's baked in. Yeah. And everything was seen through this developmental lens. And then somebody sent me a video from Dave Snowden. I think it was from 2016 or something like that. It's actually called an awkward title, very long, but it made sense. It's like how leaders change culture through small actions. And my partner and we listened to it. We listened to it again. We listened again. It's like, oh my God, there's so many answers to our inquiries and to our question marks that we were holding. And it was like zip files of meaning. And we had to, like listen, go back, listen again. Yeah, that's it. Unpack the whole thing. And this was it. This is actually what I've been searching for quite some time. From 2012 to 16. And then I went to a workshop and we got to know Dave. And I remember it was a 4-day workshop in Helsinki. And we were promised he was there, and he wasn't. He was only there for 10 hours and flying around the globe, to New York for meetings, stuff like that. So Hannes learned that a week later he was in Berlin, and so we picked him up the plane, and he dragged us into a bar, typical Sunday afternoon pub in Berlin, very loud, and we just talked for 2 hours. And then at the end you say, oh, your company deals with feedback through the SenseMaker. Here's a feedback. That wasn't cool that you were not there at the workshop. And he says, oh, I didn't know. I didn't promise anybody. He said, no, we actually asked your office whether you were there. And they said, yes. And he says, guys, I make it up to you. We meet at your place. I bring along some colleagues of mine. You invite all the people you were at the workshop with, and we do some business development together. And that was the beginning of a good friendship and mentorship. We were a bit nervous We stocked up on gin and tonic as a plan B, but it wasn't necessary. It was a really wonderful. And so, yeah, we've been developing stuff together and clients and the SenseMaker projects. And yeah, that was really cool. So now we're also running the Cynefin base camp for Dave's company. And yeah, use him as sounding boards, and sometimes he uses us as sounding board, which is really cool.
Very well. And Anna, how did you get into this field? So maybe we go up to 30,000 feet and fly back into your childhood. What had an imprint on your life that it took that particular turn? So parents, role models.
It took that particular turn. Well, I studied all things nature because my family was very nature oriented, and my brother's a botanist early on. My dad was also very much into orchids and nature things. So this whole ecology approach is very much my home turf. And funnily enough, it's, the go-to metaphors of Dave Snowden. He's always into ecology metaphors because that's actually complex adaptive systems. And I studied it, and you're trained to think in complex adaptive systems. It's what happens if I introduce that? What happens if I open up a dam or close a river or something like that? So that's the training. So I feel very much at home with this kind of complexity thinking. Now you add humans to it, it becomes a different story still. Yeah. And so for me, that instance was when I was had nothing to do yet with Cynefin or anything like that, but it brought me into the human realm. So one instance that I was as a young planner coming to Italy, and it was the third country I lived in. So two things happened. One is that I saw that the best projects, I was very much into sustainability projects back then, the best projects didn't work when the human factor was off. You know, that was also in directional values, or people didn't feel heard, with participation and stuff like that. So yeah, you could plan all you wanted, even with good money and funding, but it wouldn't work if you didn't involve the people dimension. The second instance was personal. Uh, in the third country I lived in, I ran into the same patterns, and I was kind of livid because I didn't see it. I just saw it that some patterns would repeat themselves. So somebody coached me actually, where I rejected this out of hand. It's like, don't bother me with this. I know myself well. I don't need coaching. Yeah.
Can you share such a pattern that repeated itself?
Oh, back then I think I was overqualified, underpaid, and using that to avoid responsibility. That was the pattern. But I can only name it in hindsight because I was fully in it and didn't see it. Yeah, and so yeah, somebody coached me, and that was this consciousness training thing that I said. I was running programs or running certain behaviors in order to not feel certain things or avoid responsibility, and made up a whole smoke screen around it for not seeing it. Yeah, that was basically the whole pattern architecture. And in that moment, after half an hour, I remember on the terrace with the view to the Colosseum with all this, antenna forest that you see on the rooftops of Italian buildings. I had this shock moment of seeing all my patterns running. It's like that was a matrix moment where like cried and sweat, and so these structures all crumbled, and I saw them all encoded, and I said, okay, I need to do something about this. I need to clean up my own act because I'm doing this here, I'm doing this there, I'm doing this in relationships and what have you. So, that was a real oh shit moment that said, okay, I'm out of integrity with myself. And and then hiding it from myself. So I got into this training and I never stopped since. So that was actually the beginning of going into how humans think, how I thought, how I was hiding, the whole thing that now we would call immunity to change, Robert Keegan or something like that, and say, wow, this is how it works from the inside, not as an intellectual stance. So I started cleaning up. And I started doing trainings in the US and all over the place in Europe. We didn't have a word for coaching back then. It was 25 years ago. And it wasn't quite coaching as we see it today. And yeah, then I was also giving courses, brought me into teaching at university at La Sapienza, into private university, also in Rome, about business ethics, leadership, and I got into integral theory, into developmental theory, into Keegan, Wilber, and all these people, and it was really interesting, and that human dimension. And I got into corporate social responsibility, governance, and leadership, and then into that kind of coaching. And I did this parallel with my own profession, or former profession, I need to say, for about 10 years. And then I actually found out that the leverage to change is actually much higher if I work with people like that than as a planner, let's say. And then there was also that then I had a little company now together with my partner for coaching and this kind of work.
So you're combining the fascination of human development with the fascination how systems unfold.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And that is also your partner is also what brought you to Leadership Choices. We figured must be 7, 8 years ago,
Yeah.
something like that. And since then we're working together. Very cool, Anna. Thank you so much for, taking us through the world of your thinking and of your work, and also your, what brought you here. I got 2 more questions for you, and that is kind of applied complexity. The first one. Assuming you turn on the news, how do you make sure that you stay in a good mood when you listen to all the shit that's going on right now in the world?
That's a very good question. I have a look that I don't listen too long to the news just to be informed. And it's actually, if you look with a complexity lens on what's going on, it cannot be not interesting to see, because this is, in complexity, we always want to have a look what's going on right now. And you kind of like start thinking, what would be the constraints you could shift in order to make the system more generative into a right next step or something like that. So you always, this is running always. And that puts me actually in quite a good mood.
So that it helps you to create that thinking structure, helps you to create a distance between you and the stuff.
Yeah.
By analyzing it. Okay. Yeah, that's an analytical approach to dealing with it. Okay. I'm collecting all these strategies over 5 years, so that's more of the rare categories. Thank you for that. And Anna, last question is always, what's the question I haven't asked you yet that would be interesting for our listeners and viewers?
A question you haven't asked me yet is about the fun factor of this work.
So, Anna, how can that be fun?
No, I mean, yeah, you said analytical this or felt sense that, and I really have to add, it's my partner Hannes and I, we're really enthusiastic about this work because it sets so much attention free and about, duh, uh, of course we do it this way, and it's a lot of fun dealing with this kind of stuff, and also to see clients faces light up, or this really in the sense of making sense. We love it if something makes sense and comes back into flow. That is. Somebody asked me once, "What's the difference between what you once doing and how come you were a landscape architect?" And I said, "Yeah, it's tricky, but I did, for example, a project in Rome where we were." Like river rehabilitation, where you actually go into a river and have a look what is hindering to self-regulation, what is the structures that get in the way. And in a way, we do this now with sense making and with the coaching. It's fantastic if you see, wow, now the hindrances are getting out of the way and systems are flowing again, or yeah, that's really fun.
I'm just thinking, I see you in a wetsuit in Munich in the Eisbach,
Yeah.
trying to interview the wave, what it needs to become back and stuff like that.
But you were joking. I don't know if you heard me on some of the trainings. That is one of my favorite examples or metaphors for working with constraints, because the Eisbach, or in Thun, there is also, I had some photos of in Thun, the standing wave. And that's a very good metaphor for culture. We're dealing with a lot of standing waves, that has, and in complexity, we don't have a look, oh, what do we rather have than the standing wave? We have a look, why is this wave standing and why is it standing the way it is? And how much sense would it actually be, like you're saying, jumping into the Eisbach and asking the wave something or try to push it away? Yeah. Here, the approach is much more elegant. You have a look at the constraints, what's holding it in place. And this is now physical metaphors like the amount of water going through or the aperture or, how the soil is and that makes the wave standing. But, like with the trolleys, you take away some of these constraints, the wave change. Yeah. And how many of our approaches are actually jumping in and trying to push the wave, change our culture?
That's a great closing statement, I would say, Anne. Thank you so much. Thank you for this tour around complexity and a little bit
Too brainy.
um, not for me. This is why we do this, right? To really explain it and de-brain it or break it down so that everybody can understand it. Thank you so much for that, Anne. And looking forward to continue the work we have together in this organizational coaching chapter. And all the best to you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Have a good day. Bye bye.
Bye.
So that was Anne. What resonated with you? What is still stuck in your mind? Do you have a question? Just send us an email. Just leave us a comment on your platform of choice. Our email address is leaderstalk, one word, at leadership-choices.com. Looking forward to hearing from you. We answer all of your questions as always. And now, thanks for listening, for viewing. Stay healthy, and see you next time at Leaders Talk. Bye bye.